Thunder crashed overhead as Ethan McKnight secured the last of his horses in the stable. The Wyoming sky had darkened to an ominous slate gray, and the first heavy drops of rain were already pelting the worn wooden roof of the barn. His ranch, nestled in the foothills of the Grand Tetons, was typically his sanctuary from the world, but tonight the approaching storm brought with it an uneasiness he couldn't shake. "Come on, Belle," he murmured to the nervous Palomino, stroking her neck. "It's just a storm. We've weathered worse." At 42, Ethan had spent the better part of 2 decades on this land, building it up from nothing after leaving his career as a wildlife veterinarian in Jackson. The solitude suited him after the tragedy that had driven him from city life, the car accident that had claimed his wife and daughter 8 years ago. Out here, with just his animals and the vast Wyoming wilderness, the pain had dulled to a manageable ache. As he made his way back to his cabin through the intensifying downpour, a flash of lightning illuminated something unusual at the edge of his property. A dark shape crumpled near the fence line. Squinting through the rain, Ethan's heart raced as recognition dawned. A person. "Hey," he called out, breaking into a run. "Hey, are you all right?" The figure didn't move. Drawing closer, Ethan found a young woman, perhaps in her early 20s, collapsed in the mud. Her dark hair was plastered to her face, and blood seeped through her torn jacket. Kneeling beside her, he checked for a pulse, relief flooding through him when he felt the faint but steady beat beneath his fingers. "Miss, can you hear me?" No response. With the storm intensifying, Ethan made a quick decision. Carefully, he lifted the unconscious woman into his arms, noticing her slight frame and the strange beaded bracelet around her wrist, handcrafted with symbols he didn't recognize. Inside his cabin, Ethan placed her gently on the couch and assessed her injuries. A deep gash ran along her left arm, and bruises were forming on her face. His veterinary training took over as he cleaned and stitched the wound, thankful that it looked worse than it actually was. No signs of internal bleeding, but she had a mild concussion based on a swelling at the back of her head. As he worked, the young woman's eyes fluttered open, dark brown and instantly filled with panic. "It's okay," Ethan said, keeping his voice calm. "You're safe. I found you outside during the storm. I'm Ethan McKnight. This is my ranch." She tried to sit up but winced, falling back against the cushions. "Don't move too much," he advised. "You've got a nasty cut and probably a concussion." "Where?" Her voice cracked. "Where am I?" "About 15 miles outside of Moose, Wyoming, near Grand Teton National Park." Ethan offered her a glass of water, which she accepted with trembling hands. "What's your name?" She hesitated, eyes darting around the cabin as if assessing potential threats. "Nia," she finally said. "Nia Blackwood." "Well, Nia, want to tell me how you ended up unconscious on my property in the middle of a thunderstorm?" Her expression darkened. "I was hiking. Got lost. Then the storm." She trailed off, but Ethan sensed there was more to the story. Her clothes weren't typical hiking gear, and who went hiking alone with a storm approaching? "The nearest trail is 5 miles from here," he noted. "That's a long way to wander off." Nia's gaze met his, defiant despite her weakened state. "I said I got lost." Ethan recognized the wall she was putting up. He'd built his own after his loss. "All right," he conceded. "You should rest. We can figure things out in the morning." Outside, the storm raged on, rain lashing against the windows. Ethan prepared the spare bedroom, his mind spinning with questions about his mysterious guest. As he brought extra blankets to the room, he noticed Nia had fallen asleep on the couch, her features softened in repose, making her look younger and more vulnerable. A strange feeling of protectiveness washed over him, something he hadn't felt in years. For tonight, at least, she was safe here. Tomorrow would bring its own complications, but as the thunder rumbled overhead, Ethan found himself grateful for the unexpected company that had broken his years of self-imposed isolation. What he didn't know was that by bringing Nia Blackwood into his home, he had inadvertently placed himself at the center of a conflict that would change his quiet existence forever. Morning light filtered through the cabin windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. Ethan had barely slept, alternating between checking on his guest and wondering what trouble he might have invited into his home. He was at the stove frying eggs when he heard movement behind him. "You should be resting," he said without turning around. "I've rested enough." Nia's voice was stronger today, though still wary. She stood in the doorway of the kitchen, her posture tense despite her injuries. She'd found the clean clothes he'd left out for her, an old flannel shirt and jeans that had belonged to his late wife, Sarah. They hung loose on her frame, but were better than her muddy, torn clothes from the night before. Ethan slid a plate of eggs and toast across the counter. "Eat, then we can talk about getting you back where you belong." "I don't belong anywhere," she muttered, but took the plate and sat at the small wooden table. Over breakfast, Ethan observed her more carefully. Despite her youth, there was a hardness to her eyes that spoke of difficult experiences. The beaded bracelet she wore, the only personal item she'd kept on, looked handmade, with intricate patterns woven into it. "That's beautiful work," he commented, nodding toward the bracelet. "Family heirloom." Nia's hand instinctively covered it. "Something like that." She met his gaze. "Thank you for helping me. Not everyone would have. Anyone decent would have done the same." Ethan stood to clear his plate. "So, are you going to tell me the truth about how you ended up on my land?" A shadow crossed Nia's face. "I told you. You were hiking and got lost." "Yeah, that doesn't explain the cut on your arm or why you look like you've been running from something." Ethan leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "I've patched you up and given you shelter. I think I deserve the truth." Silence stretched between them, broken only by the ticking of the old clock on the wall. Finally, Nia sighed. "I was running," she admitted, "but not from what you think. I'm from the Wind River Reservation, Eastern Shoshone." She touched the bracelet. "This was my grandmother's. She died last month." Ethan's expression softened. "I'm sorry for your loss. After she died, things got complicated. My cousin Jeremy took over as head of our extended family. He's involved with some people, bad people. They've been using our land, our resources." Her voice hardened. "I found evidence. Records. Enough to get him in trouble with tribal authorities, and probably federal law enforcement too." "And he found out," Ethan concluded. Nia nodded. "2 days ago. I barely got away. I've been running since, trying to make it to Jackson, where I have a friend who works for the Forest Service. I thought I could trust her to help me contact the right authorities." She looked down at her bandaged arm. "Jeremy's men caught up with me yesterday. I managed to get away in the storm, but I fell down an embankment. That's the last thing I remember before waking up here." Ethan processed her story, evaluating its plausibility. The Wind River Reservation was about 100 miles east, a long way to travel on foot, but not impossible if she'd hitched rides or stolen transportation. "These records," he asked, "where are they now?" Nia hesitated, then reached into her boot beside the couch where her clothes had been laid out to dry. She pulled out a small waterproof pouch containing a USB drive. "Here, financial records, correspondence, photos of illegal dumping on sacred land. Jeremy's been taking payoffs from a mining company to let them dispose of waste on the reservation." Ethan whistled low. "That's federal territory. EPA violations, corruption. That's why they want it back, and why they want me silenced." Nia's eyes flashed with determination. "My grandmother raised me to protect our land, our people. I won't let her down." The weight of her situation sank in. Ethan ran a hand through his graying hair, suddenly aware of the complexity of what he'd stepped into. His isolated ranch had been his refuge from the world's problems, and now those problems had quite literally landed on his doorstep. "You need to contact the authorities," he said firmly. "Not yet. Jeremy has connections in the local police. I need to get this to someone I can trust." Nia winced as she shifted in her chair, her injuries still clearly painful. "I just need a couple of days to recover. Then I'll be out of your hair." Ethan should have said no. Should have driven her to Jackson himself and been done with it. But something in her determined gaze reminded him of his daughter, the same fierce spirit she'd had even at 12 years old. 2 days, he agreed reluctantly. "But if these men are looking for you, they might track you here." "I'm not looking for trouble, Nia," Neither am I, she replied softly. But sometimes trouble finds you anyway. Outside, a hawk circled above the pasture, its cry echoing across the valley. Neither of them could have known that miles away, a group of men were already closing in on Ethan's secluded ranch, following the trail of the girl who had dared to challenge them. By the second day, a routine had settled between them. Ethan tended his ranch, checking fences, feeding livestock, mending equipment, while Nia recovered, her strength returning visibly with each passing hour. Despite his initial reservations, he found her presence oddly comforting after years of solitude. She was quiet but observant, often watching him work from the porch, asking occasional questions about ranch life. That afternoon, Ethan returned from checking his northern pasture to find Nia in the kitchen, her hair tied back, stirring something that filled the cabin with a rich, unfamiliar aroma. "Hope you don't mind," she said, noticing his surprise. "Found some ingredients and thought I'd make dinner. It's fried bread and bison stew, my grandmother's recipe. Well, adapted to what you had available." "Didn't know I had bison," Ethan remarked, washing his hands at the sink. "You didn't. Used your beef." A hint of a smile played at her lips, the first he'd seen. "But the spices are right. Grandmother always said food is medicine." They ate on the porch, watching the sunset paint the distant mountains in shades of gold and pink. The stew was unlike anything Ethan had tasted. Complex flavors of sage, juniper, and something else he couldn't identify. "This is incredible," he admitted between bites. Grandmother was the real cook. She knew all the traditional foods, the ones our people ate before. Nia trailed off, her gaze distant. "She tried to teach us the old ways. Said it was how we keep our spirit alive." Ethan nodded, understanding the sentiment. "My father was the same way about this land. Taught me every creek and ridge, how to read the weather, track animals." He gestured to the mountains. Said as long as we remembered the land, we'd never truly be lost. "Your father sounds wise," Nia said. "Is he?" "Gone 10 years now. Heart attack while fixing fence line over that ridge." Ethan pointed to the west. Found him with his tools still in his hands. A comfortable silence fell between them, two people who understood loss sitting together as the day faded. After dinner, Nia insisted on helping with the dishes despite her injured arm. As they worked side by side in the small kitchen, Ethan found himself sharing stories about his life here, the hard winters, the satisfying summers, the peace he'd found in this remote place. "And your wife?" Nia asked cautiously, noting the wedding photo he kept on the mantel. "If you don't mind my asking." Ethan's hand stilled momentarily. "Car accident. 8 years ago. Sarah and our daughter, Emma. Black ice on the highway coming back from a school event in Jackson." He rarely spoke of them aloud, the words feeling strange on his tongue. "I was supposed to be with them, but got called to an emergency at the clinic where I worked." "I'm sorry," Nia said simply, not offering the usual platitudes people gave. "After that, I couldn't stay in town. Too many memories. Came out here to my father's land, rebuilt this place." He dried his hands on a towel. "Found some peace, I guess. But not healing," Nia observed quietly. Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of a vehicle approaching. Tires on gravel, engine running rough. Ethan moved quickly to the window, peering through the gathering dusk. "Were you expecting someone?" Nia asked, tension evident in her voice. "No." Ethan reached for the rifle he kept above the door. "Get in the back room. Stay quiet." Heart pounding, he watched as an old pickup truck pulled up to his gate. A man got out, middle-aged, Native American, wearing a faded denim jacket. He approached cautiously, hands visible, stopping at the fence line. "Hello, the house," the man called. "I'm looking for Nia Blackwood. I mean her no harm." Ethan felt Nia's presence behind him, having ignored his instruction to hide. "Who is it?" she whispered. Peering through the window, she gasped softly. "That's Ben Littlefeather, my grandmother's cousin. He's on the tribal council." Relief flooded her voice. "He's one of the good ones." "You sure?" Ethan kept his rifle ready. "How would he know to find you here?" "I don't know," she admitted. "But if anyone would help me against Jeremy, it's Ben." Ethan weighed the options, studying the man who stood patiently at his fence. No visible weapons alone, making no attempt to hide his approach or identity. All right, he decided. But I'll talk to him first. You stay inside until I'm sure. Stepping onto the porch, rifle held casually but ready, Ethan called out, "State your business." "Name's Benjamin Littlefeather. I'm looking for Nia Blackwood, my cousin's granddaughter. She's in danger." The man's voice was steady, his posture non-threatening. "There are men coming for her. Bad men. I need to get her somewhere safe." "And how did you find this place?" Ethan asked, suspicious. "Followed the same tracks they're following. I'm just hoping I got here first." Ben's expression grew urgent. "Please, there's not much time. Is she here?" Before Ethan could answer, Nia stepped onto the porch beside him. "I'm here, Uncle Ben. What's happening?" Ben's relief was palpable. "Nia, thank the Creator. Jeremy and his men, they're coming. They know where you are. We need to leave now." The weight of the situation descended on Ethan as he realized his peaceful existence had been irrevocably disrupted. Whatever came next, he was now involved in Nia's struggle, a reluctant alliance forged by circumstance, and perhaps something more that he wasn't yet ready to acknowledge. "We can't just leave," Ethan argued as Ben and Nia hurriedly gathered her few belongings. "If these men are coming, we need to call the authorities." Ben shook his head grimly. "Jeremy has the local sheriff in his pocket, and the tribal police chief is his cousin." He checked his watch anxiously. "We have maybe an hour before they get here." "How many?" Ethan asked, military instincts from his youth surfacing. 4, maybe 5 men. Jeremy will be with them." Ben's weathered face hardened. "They're armed." Ethan paced the cabin's main room, mind racing. He hadn't survived 2 decades in this wilderness by being unprepared. "I know these mountains better than anyone. If they're coming by the main road, there's only one approach to this property." A plan began forming in his mind, one that didn't involve running. "Ben, you said you serve on the tribal council. Who can you trust outside the reservation? Federal authorities?" "I have a contact in the FBI field office in Cheyenne," Ben admitted. "Agent who specializes in crimes on tribal land. She's helped us before." "Call her," Ethan decided. "Get her here. But we need to buy time." Nia, who had been silently listening, stepped forward. "No, I won't put you in danger, Ethan. This isn't your fight. They made it my fight when they decided to come to my home." Ethan's voice was steel. He turned to Ben. "Make that call. Then help me secure the property." The next 45 minutes passed in tense preparation. Ethan moved his horses to the back pasture, away from potential gunfire. He positioned his truck to block the narrow entrance to his property and gathered what weapons he had: the hunting rifle, a shotgun, and his father's old revolver. Ben returned from making his call, expression grim but determined. "Agent Ramirez is on her way, but it'll take at least 2 hours. Then we hold them off until she gets here." Ethan surveyed his land from the porch. The fading daylight cast long shadows across the property, the mountains looming dark against the twilight sky. "Nia, I want you in the root cellar. There's an exit that leads to the creek bed if things go bad." "I won't hide while you risk your lives," she protested. "This isn't negotiable," Ethan said firmly. "Those records you have, they're the evidence. If something happens to us, you need to get them to the authorities." Before she could argue further, the distant sound of vehicles approaching broke the evening quiet. Ethan's jaw tightened. "They're early." Through his binoculars, he counted 2 trucks coming up the mountain road, dust billowing behind them. 5 men, all armed. "Jeremy's in the lead truck," Ben confirmed, taking the binoculars. "The others are his enforcers. Hired muscle." Nia's face paled, but her voice remained steady. "I should talk to him. Maybe I can reason." "No," both men said simultaneously. "Get to the cellar," Ethan instructed. Now, after ensuring Nia was safely hidden, Ethan and Ben took positions on the porch. The approaching vehicles stopped at the gate, blocked by Ethan's truck. 5 men got out, spreading into a loose formation. The leader, Jeremy Blackwood, stepped forward. Even at a distance, the family resemblance to Nia was evident. The same strong jawline, the same intense eyes, though his held none of her compassion. "We know she's here, McKnight," Jeremy called out. "Hand over my cousin and what she stole from me, and we'll leave you in peace." "This is private property," Ethan responded evenly, rifle visible but not aimed. "I suggest you turn around and leave." Jeremy laughed, the sound echoing across the yard. "You don't understand what you've stepped into, Cowboy. This is tribal business. Illegal dumping on reservation land is federal business," Ben called out, stepping into view, "as is threatening people at gunpoint." Jeremy's expression darkened seeing Ben. "You old fool. Always sticking your nose where it doesn't belong. Just like grandmother." "Your grandmother wanted to protect our people," Ben replied, "not sell them out for profit." The tension crackled like electricity in the air. Jeremy signaled to his men, who began spreading out, moving toward the fence line from different angles. "Last chance," Jeremy warned. "Give us the girl and the drive." Ethan's finger rested lightly on his rifle's trigger. Not happening. The standoff stretched for several heartbeats, neither side willing to back down. Then, without warning, one of Jeremy's men fired a shot, the bullet splintering wood from the porch railing. Chaos erupted. Ethan and Ben ducked for cover as more shots rang out. Ethan returned fire, aiming carefully at the ground near the attackers, a warning, not intending to hit anyone. Ben fired the shotgun into the air, the boom echoing across the valley. From his position behind an overturned table, Ethan saw two of Jeremy's men attempting to circle behind the cabin. "They're trying to flank us," he shouted to Ben. Inside the root cellar, Nia listened to the gunfire above, heart pounding. She couldn't hide while Ethan and Ben risked their lives. Making a decision, she slipped the USB drive into her boot and quietly opened the cellar's back exit, emerging into the deepening twilight behind the cabin. As the gunfight intensified, Jeremy's voice cut through the chaos. "Burn him out. Burn the whole place down." Ethan watched in horror as one of the men produced a Molotov cocktail, lit the rag, and prepared to throw it toward the cabin. In that moment, Ethan realized this was no longer about scaring them off. These men had come to eliminate witnesses, permanently. The confrontation had just escalated from dangerous to deadly. The bottle arced through the air, trailing flames against the darkening sky. Ethan's shot rang out, shattering the Molotov in mid-flight. Glass and burning liquid rained harmlessly onto the dirt yard, but the message was clear. Jeremy's men weren't leaving without blood. "We need to get to the barn." Ethan shouted to Ben over the continued gunfire. "More cover there, and I can release the horses as a distraction." Ben nodded, firing another blast from the shotgun to give them cover. Together, they made a desperate dash across the open space between cabin and barn, bullets kicking up dirt at their heels. They crashed through the barn door, slamming it shut behind them. "Where's your nearest neighbor?" Ben gasped, reloading his shotgun. 3 miles downriver," Ethan replied grimly. "Miller family. They might hear the gunshots, but they won't get here in time." Outside, Jeremy bellowed orders to his men. "Check the cellar. Find her." Ethan's blood ran cold. "Nia." Before he could finish, the barn side door creaked open. Both men swung their weapons toward the sound. "It's me," Nia whispered urgently, slipping inside. Her face was streaked with dirt, her eyes wild with fear and determination. "They're coming around back." "Damn it, I told you to stay hidden." Ethan hissed, but there was no time for arguments. "We need to hold out until the FBI arrives." The sound of breaking glass from the direction of the cabin caught their attention. Through a gap in the barn boards, they watched in horror as flames began to lick at the cabin's porch. One of Jeremy's men had successfully thrown another firebomb. "My home," Ethan whispered, a lifetime of memories going up in smoke before his eyes. "I'm so sorry," Nia said, gripping his arm. "This is all because of me." Ethan's expression hardened. "No. This is because men like Jeremy think they can take whatever they want without consequences." He checked his ammunition. 8 rounds left. "Make them count." The fire spread quickly, the old wood of the cabin catching like tinder in the dry mountain air. The blaze illuminated the yard in flickering orange light, creating dancing shadows that made it difficult to track Jeremy's men as they advanced. "They're using the fire as cover to approach," Ben warned, peering through a crack in the barn wall. Suddenly, the whinny of frightened horses filled the air as smoke drifted toward the barn. Ethan moved quickly to the stalls. "We need to let them out before they panic." As they worked to free the nervous animals, a new sound cut through the night. Distant sirens, growing closer. "That can't be the FBI already," Ben said, confusion evident in his voice. "Local fire department maybe," Ethan suggested. "Someone must have seen the smoke." Jeremy heard the sirens too. "Wrap it up," he shouted to his men. "Burn the barn and let's go." The next moments were a blur of action. Ethan threw open the main barn doors, sending the frightened horses galloping out into the night, directly toward Jeremy's men. In the confusion, one of the attackers was knocked to the ground by a panicked stallion, his weapon skittering away. Gunfire continued to exchange, but the approaching sirens clearly had Jeremy worried. "Fall back," he ordered. "To the trucks." As Jeremy's men retreated, Ethan, Ben, and Nia made their move, running for the cover of the equipment shed on the far side of the property. From there, they watched as Jeremy and his remaining men piled into their vehicles. But Jeremy wasn't leaving empty-handed. He paused at his truck, raised his rifle, and fired a deliberate shot toward them. Ethan felt the bullet was past his ear, splintering wood behind him. "This isn't over," Jeremy shouted over the roar of the engine. "Not by a long shot." The trucks peeled away, tires throwing gravel as they sped down the mountain road. As the vehicles disappeared around the bend, 3 pickup trucks came into view from the opposite direction, headlights cutting through the smoke-filled air. But these weren't police or fire vehicles. They were ranch trucks, each filled with men carrying rifles and shotguns. "Miller," Ethan breathed in disbelief as the lead truck skidded to a halt. His nearest neighbor, Frank Miller, jumped out, rifle in hand, followed by his 2 adult sons and several ranch hands. "Ethan," Frank called out, rushing toward them. "Saw the fire from our ridge. What in God's name happened here?" "Long story," Ethan replied, the adrenaline beginning to ebb from his system. "But you're a sight for sore eyes, Frank." More vehicles appeared on the road, this time genuine emergency responders. 2 sheriff's department cruisers and a fire truck wound their way up the mountain. As the firefighters rushed to contain the blaze consuming Ethan's cabin, Ben pulled Nia and Ethan aside. "The sheriff's department is here. Remember, we can't trust them completely." Ethan nodded grimly, watching as his home of 20 years continued to burn. "We tell them only what we have to. The full story is for the FBI." Nia's hand found his, squeezing gently. "I never meant for any of this to happen. You're home." "It's just wood and nails," Ethan said quietly, though the loss cut deep. "What matters is we're alive, and we have the evidence." As they stood together watching the firefighters battle the blaze, the Miller family gathering around them in support, something shifted in Ethan's heart. For 8 years, he had lived in isolation, hiding from his grief and the world. Now, forced out of that solitude by circumstances beyond his control, he found himself surrounded by people willing to stand with him, unexpected allies in a fight he hadn't chosen but now couldn't walk away from. In the distance, more headlights appeared on the mountain road. "That'll be Agent Ramirez," Ben said. "Now the real work begins." Ethan looked at Nia, her face illuminated by the firelight, strength and determination evident despite her exhaustion. Whatever came next, whatever rebuilding lay ahead, both of his home and his life, he knew with sudden clarity that he wouldn't be facing it alone. The clan that now stood at his fence was not the one he had feared, but one that offered protection, justice, and perhaps, in time, healing.